I want to show you real quick. This would be something kind of like, again, this is extremely high level that we would start off from that conversation. And typically what I would be doing, and for those who came last time, I actually had my pad and started scratching out things that we were pulling together for visualizations. Very similar when we have a data discussion. I usually like to have something that I'm kind of scratching out my thoughts, starting off with, the types of things that we're going to be actually creating from it. And that's a very limited set, but then start from the different data sets and transformations we need, but kind of just visualizing what we need to do and how we need to do it. And then I would actually have a lot more notes written on here in a relative situation. And then what we do is start taking each one of these individually and having conversations on these, especially when you talk about transformations, when you talk about, the different models we may want to inject. And of course, performance is a whole conversation on its own, but this gives you a good start from a high level to be able to start seeing that is. So one last thing I want to mention very briefly, and then we're going to kick this off to AJ. So when we talk about data prep, we've talked about a lot of different things that we want to be aware of and address before we put data in front of a user when it comes straight from the data set. But the question that comes now, especially these days, it used to be more cut and dry, but these days is where does that data prep happen? And there's tons of capabilities out there. So does that happen in your data architecture, first of all? Where you're actually creating ETL processes and you have data warehouses and data marts and those type of things that are actually doing some of the transformations before they actually get to the users. Is that you're going to be on premise in the cloud? There's lots of things. Are you going to be using data virtualization when you're going directly out to the data and doing things in a virtualized manner? So there's lots of questions that we're not going to get into today. It's for a further conversation, but that you want to kind of think through as you go through this and start really mapping out use case to use case. Where do those things need to happen? Do we have a data ops procedure, or creating pipelines that we can feed these things through? Today, though, we're going to focus more on how do you do that with the analytics tool, because today's tools like Web Focus, which AJ is going to be showing, give you a lot of power within the tool itself to do that data prep from the data itself before you even get into the analytics part of it and creating metadata from that. With that said, AJ, we'll kick this off to you and let you kind of jump into the demo. I know you got a few slides to set it up and then show people some of the things that we've kind of been talking about, or at least close to what we've been talking about.
Thanks so much, Tim. And I just wanted to take that conversation that Tim had about data preparation and sort of break it out into the technicalities of what data preparation really is. So this is one definition that I really like from Gartner. It says that data preparation is an iterative and agile process for finding, combining, cleaning, transforming, and sharing all sort of curated data sets for different activities like BI, machine learning, and self-service data integration. And what I really like about this, that it first of all specifies all the basic components of data preparation. For example, finding the data, combining the data, cleaning, transforming, and sharing the data. But then it also talks about the iterative and agile component of the data preparation, which I believe in today's world, it's very important to have the operationalization aspect and being agile aspect of the data preparation, right? So that said, let's look at in the Web Focus platform, what type of data preparation activities can happen. So we're looking at full life cycle of data preparation in Web Focus. So starting with being able to connect anywhere. So when you're talking about connecting to the data sources, as Joanne and Tim were talking about, they were talking about different data sources on the cloud, on-prem, in DB2, in Postgres, exposing the APIs and connecting to the APIs, pulling the data from there, and then being able to visually discover that data, right? So it's one thing to get the data, but then the users really need to understand what that data is all about, to be able to visually profile that data. Then we talk about cleansing the data, right? Blending the data together from all these different data sources and making sure that it is secured enough, right? And then we transform the data so that the users understand they're getting the data in the right format, and then publish that data. And while the whole cycle is happening, being able to get that iterative and agile component of it, which means being able to automate that data flow process, right? So that's what we're going to look at into the demo. And there's one last slide that talks about that although primarily a lot of data preparation activities are done by data analysts and data scientists, and maybe some by the business users, but directly or indirectly, I would say everyone within the organization is involved in how the data preparation should be done, right? And that's exactly what we are going to look at in the demo, right? So we're going to start with, right? So first of all, Focus is completely web-based application, right? So that you don't have to worry about any clients. You just fire a browser and you log in inside the portal, and that's going to be your Focus application, right? So I'm going to log in the Focus portal, and based on the security, based on what I have access to, I'm going to land on this page. I call this the Focus homepage, and I'm looking at all the recent contents, my visuals, my charts, my reports, all the data sets, anything that I have recently accessed or created or someone else has created and shared to me. I'm looking at some of the items that I have in my favorites. I'm looking at some portals as well. Again, completely web-based application. So you can tie it up with the Active Directory, single sign-on, and any other security mechanism that you have in place today. Right. So the first thing that we're going to look at from the business user point of view, let's say I'm a business user and I want to go ahead and upload an Excel file, and I want to explore the data or prepare the data while I am creating the content. So dynamically, I want to prepare the data. This is the Web Focus landing page that I was talking about. And I'm looking at the recent items, my favorites, and all the portals. Now, again, it's all based on the permissions, as I talked about. So when I want to connect to a data source, I'm going to get data. And Tim, I'm just confirming, are you able to still see the screen? The get data screen.
Yes, we can see it.
All right. So we are on the right track. So I'm looking at all my connections now that I have access to. I'm looking at the cloud sources, my DB2 sources, or anything that I have on my desktop. I can upload that as well. And we're going to take that same example of the markdown data that Tim and Joanne was talking about. So I'm looking at markdown. I just uploaded markdown data set. And this is from the first page itself. I'm going to start my data preparation activities, right? So in this data set, I'm looking at date, my product name, package, all the markdown related information related to the 4 different markdowns that happened, and compare the number of orders from last year to the current year. Now, a couple of things that I can do right here. I can pick and choose the columns that I want to, let's say, right? I can go into here, more options. And I know there is a date field. So I want to change that date field, or I want to decompose that date field into formatted and non-formatted date. And you'll see what the output will be. If I have any geographic field, it's going to automatically categorize those geographic field and put them into a hierarchy, right? So let's decompose the date right here. So it's going to prep the data again for me. And now I can see the date, year, quarter, month, day, and in the format, I'm going to see these date fields. Now, I didn't create anything yet. The system automatically went ahead and created date fields for me, right? The second thing I can do is I can pick and choose. Now we are uploading a data set. So we can either push the data set into a table somewhere in a repository, or I can report directly against the data set as well. So that would be, I would be using Adapter for this. I can use application folders. So everything that you're doing in Web Focus, it's application-based, it's folder-based, it's easy to organize in those applications. So I'm going to put this in the application that I have access to, right? And finally, when I want to load it, well, I can simply go and load here. Now, one thing that I want to do before loading is I want to classify. Now, this is another classification component for especially, take an example that Joanne was talking about, the COVID data, right? So on every 15-day basis or weekly basis, the data is coming in. Now, I need to, as the data is coming in, I need to classify that data. If I want to blend that data together, I want to have a union of the data sets with the data sets that I already have. So that's what I'm doing, classification. It's going to look at all the character-based field and is going to automatically classify it. Now the classification component, it's not a one size fits all. It's a machine learning model that's running in the backend, and it's very specific for every customer. So for every customer, there's going to be different classification mechanism. Now, once I'm done with this, I can go ahead and simply load it. It's saying I already have a synonym. So what's happening when I'm loading the data? So on the back end, it's creating a synonym file, right? And that basically, when I say synonym file, I'm talking about a metadata file. And that metadata file defines all these fields. But in this scenario, what I want to do is I want to just go ahead and start creating content. And I want to see what data prep activities can I do when I'm creating the content, right? So that's it. I'm getting into what we call the designer mode. Designer is basically the authoring tool. So you're looking at all the fields right here, all the dimensions and the measures. I'm looking at my output on the right-hand side, all the charts I'm looking right here. You can pick and choose my charts. Now, before even creating any content, what can I do? There's something called insights mode. So I can go to the insights mode and the system automatically looks at my data and it creates the correlations, outlier charts, and the time-based activity starts for me, right? So when it looked at the markdown data set, it automatically created my charts related to any correlations and outliers. So here it's telling me that the third markdown is related to the first markdown. Or let's take another one example here. Unemployment rate is related to the third markdown percentage. Now, this is very important. It's someone like a citizen data scientist who want to really understand the correlations and the outliers, right? So if I go to outliers now, I will see outliers related to the product name based on the average markdown price, right? Now, if I want to use any one of these, I can simply go here, plug it inside my canvas. And there you go, I have one chart. I did not drag and drop any fields. I'm just letting the system for me to understand what the data is and create the chart, right? Now, I might want to, let's say, bring in more data sets, right? So we are into the visualization mode right now. And I can go back to the data mode, right? So I'm in data mode, and then I see there are some synonym files, some data sources that I'm connected to. So I'm looking at, let's say, the product data that talks about the how many products are in stock and the inventory data, right? And it's going to do a join for me. Now I can absolutely go and edit my join, make sure that it's mapped to the right field. I can add any more fields for joining the data if needed. I can also use the expressions to join the data. So take an example, if you have an ID and you want to extract certain component of an ID and you want to map it against another ID field to join the data set, you don't have to go and create another field. You can do all those things dynamically right here. So here I have all these predefined functions, but I can say, okay, let's extract a substring and then compare it with the another ID, right? Everything happening dynamically here. I can pick and choose what join do I want. So let's say I want a left outer. I'm looking at how many fields are excluded, included, and I'm looking at the sample data right here. Now, once I'm done with my join, right, I'm looking at the join data set here at the bottom, and I can go back to the visualization mode to look at my joined fields, right? So let's go back and look at my fields again. And now you can see the markdown product data set is here. Now, what more can I do here? For example, if I have a product name and I want to group the products into different categories, basically put them into buckets, right? So let's select these product groups, product in one group, and I'm putting all the other ones in another group, right? I'm calling it a product group, right? So I just created another group field, right? What more can I do? If I have, let's say for the numeric fields, I can bin the values. So if I want to, let's say for the unit price, I want to bin it based on $10 in the range of $10, or based on the value I could do as well, right? It's going to create unit price bin for me. Right now, how that is helpful, let me just show you. If I drag another container here, go back to my fields. So instead of every unit price, now it's going to show me unit price broken down from 0 to $9.99 and $10 to $19.99 that way. a lot of things I'm doing dynamically right here. Now, there might be scenarios when you want to say, okay, let's go ahead and create new calculation, right? Absolutely, you can use all these plus minus calculations or if then else. So you can say, okay, if you find certain thing in the string, replace it with something else. That sort of basic quality rules you can apply right here. Now, if you want to get into more complex rules, let's say, or more complex transformations, there are a set of predefined functions that can be used. So let's say if I want to know the character length, or if I want to, let's say, truncate a field, or if I want to take a substring and get to know the length of it, right? And I can do the same thing for all different data types, right? I can take a timestamp and pick up certain part of the timestamp and compare it against another one. Or I can take a geographic field. I can take one point on the map and I want to check whether that point falls under a certain polygon, right? I can use the geographic functions. And then I have a lot of different mathematical and analytics functions as well, right? Plenty of different options for the business user to prep the data without even getting into the metadata side or the technicalities of the data streaming, right? So once I'm done with this, I can simply save it and I can put that into a portal and start sharing the entire page. Again, when we are sharing this, we are sharing the entire page with the users, which means that includes the data prep as well. But if they want to use this data prep, what you just did, they will probably have to go down into the metadata side, right? Now let's take another example. Let's say I'm a little tech savvy business user. Let's say I'm stepping into the shoes of a data analyst, right? And I want to go and look into that metadata that we just uploaded. I'm going to my application, and this is my markdown data set, right? So first of all, when I see this data set, I might want to look at, okay, what fields are in my data set. So I'm looking at all these different fields, the data types, the nulls and the missing, the duplicates, the character, the word pattern, everything that I might want to know in order to understand this data set, right? Now, when I come here, I see that the store, it looks like it's an integer. It should be character, but it looks like the system did not recognize it, probably an integer in the Excel file, right? So let's go back and fix some of these problems. Right, so now I'm getting inside the metadata. And one of the benefits of doing things in metadata is that once you prepare the data and share the metadata with the users, which means when they're reporting directly against this metadata file or synonym file, they will not have to go through the data preparation. It's already prepped for them. They're just going ahead and creating content based on what data preparation has been done, right? So first of all, let's say the store. I'm going to drag and drop this store into my dimensions. Again, I have measures here on the top in the green, dimensions in the blue, right? All the things that we did in the designer mode, I can absolutely do that. I can do more as well. So for example, if I'm going to product name, I'm looking at more data profiling options here. I'm looking at word patterns, phonetics. I'm looking at frequent values chart, right? I'm also looking at pivoting, so I can convert columns into rows and values into rows. I'm looking at filter options. If I want to apply the filter at the metadata level, right? I want to pick up certain products, but I want to pick a city that I want to look at. This metadata file is only for Illinois, right, of the Chicago region. So I can filter the fields right there. And then I can go ahead and add new expressions. Now, some of the things that we talked about grouping, we did grouping. We created bins. You can decode, you can convert those ones and zeros if you have into yes and no's and true and false. Now, if you know that what function do you need to apply, like predefined transformations, you can apply a function. Or if I want to get a full list of advanced expressions or my transformations, I can go here. Now, we are looking at more transformations than we saw in the designer, right? So I'm looking at analytics, I'm looking at advanced analytics. I'm looking at the statistical and machine learning now. So if you want to bring in those the predictive component or the machine learning components or models within your synonym file, where to test and train and show the result in the metadata itself, you can do it right here, right? And again, there are many predefined models automatically available to you, right? And then you can also run your own custom model as well. Now let's see if I want to apply a very basic cleansing routine, right? I'm going to replace that. I know that in the product name, there's a character A, which is a little different from what it should be. I'm going to replace that with a more understandable a very, very basic cleansing routine, right? And I'm going to validate it. So my expression is valid. When I go back, I should see another field right here, a more cleansed field, right? So that's how it simple is. You can match that. Okay, whether the character pattern for the social security code is right or not, or the telephone number is actually a telephone number or not. So those sort of validations can be done at this stage. Now, some other things that we talked about, if I want to bring in more data, join the data sources, I can do that as well. Absolutely, right? Now, again, the whole point of doing in metadata is that you have this metadata in one file, and you can easily share the prep data with the other users as well, right? Now I can save this, and I can publish it out, and I can give it to the users so they can start using this synonym file. Right. Now, let's get a little more technical. Let's say that you want to look at, you have a scenario just like Joanne talked about. There was so many different systems at different places that we're using APIs and the in-house applications and the on the cloud SaaS applications, and you want to look at the entire landscape of the data flow, right? You want to look at all the transformations in one place where the data is being pushed. You don't want the people to access the data in real time, but you really want to schedule that push. You want more control of that data. So that is where we're getting into the flow. We call it data flow. Now, this is pretty much like any workflow, probably UI that you have seen. I can start using, let's say I'm dragging in customer, I'm bringing in orders here, right? Again, I can do a join or a union, and I can start bringing more components here, right? And if I want to, let's say, edit this join, so make sure that this ID, customer ID, matches to the actual customer ID, change my join if I need to, right? Make it the left outer, and okay, right? Let's start bringing on more items here. I can bring order item, product, and supplier, right? Everything basically here, right? So that gives me a good idea about like what's happening within my environment, what's happening within the data flow with all the data sources that I'm getting. All right, what more can I do here, right? So we looked at the data sources. I can do profiling of the data. I can use box plot. So let's say if I want to look at the total amount and I want to look at by city, the variation of the sales that happen within the city, or if I want to look at the variation of the unit prices by the product, this is a very good way to look at that data, right? So that's a good way of profiling. I want to utilize all these transformations that we talked about and bring it inside my flow, right? I can do that as well. So all these things that we talked about, advanced analytics, format conversions, character-based functions, machine learning functions, everything is accessible to the users. And then we have some predefined ready-to-use model. Just on a click, you can include 4 different types of regression models in your flow as well, right? So let me show you, for the sake of time, let me show you something that I've already prepped. And let's see how, after I create the entire flow, how I can more understand the data, right? So I'm looking at here, customer to order, to the line items, adding product and supplier, pretty much covering the entire supply chain right here, right? So if I look at the final data, this is my final joined data. And now I want to visually profile this data, right? the best way for me to look at the data is probably in this graphic mode. There you go. So I'm looking at all these fields based on, it could be either the frequency of the values or based on frequency of the data or the value of the data as well, right? So I'm looking at all the values from customer to suppliers to the products, right? And let's say if I'm looking at the package and I know that 24 12-ounce bottles has the highest frequency in the data, I can pick this field and see how that impacts all the other fields within the joint, right? So now when I look at the data, I'm looking at all the customers who are buying it. I'm looking at all the products. That's one product. That's another product that has a 24 12-ounce bottle case. And then I'm looking at, and then I'm looking at the suppliers as well, right? So I'm able to track everything from starting to end. And then at any point, if I want to replace this with, let's say, any of those advanced functions or groups and bins that we talked about, that's all available to me as well, right? So now once I'm done with my flow, I can go ahead and schedule this. We have very robust scheduling capabilities. Again, lights out model. We don't want people to sit on the table and push that run button. We want to schedule it so that it schedules every Friday, Friday night, or when you know there's not much burden on the system, and you can pick and choose your date and time multiple times a week or in a specific date. And once the job finishes, you want it to email to someone else, or if there's an error, you want to email it to someone else. We have all those types of capabilities right here, right? Now, just one more thing. We looked at bringing in all the data sources, all the transformations, all the machine learning models in one page. Now, if we think about bringing people in the process, right? That is where we talk about the process flows. Now we have, let's say I'm bringing two different flows. I have my customer flow, I have the markdown flows, right? I can start mapping this out, pushing the data from one flow to another flow and putting it into, let's say, another markdown flow, right? And I can start using things like, okay, I want to take one data from one report, which is already out there, and push that data into this data set. But I want to wait for some time, like set another variable just to make sure that data is set or not, and then finally email it to the user, right? So that's how I can design the entire process, not just including the systems and the data, but also include people and the reports that have been created in the process, right? So tying back to what Tim talked about, the availability of the data, the usability, the relevance of the data, and that's how we are tying it up all together by not only giving the power to the business users to grab the data, but also getting into the metadata level, getting into the data flow level, and finally involving the people in the entire process to make it more iterative and agile.